Hi, everyone. Welcome to the raw and uncut version of today's SellOut Show. You are going to really want to pay attention to this one. It has examples and stories and really good tips of things you can do starting today in your sales practice. Dianna, tell them what you have lined up for them today.
That's exactly right. Well, first of all, it's the birthday edition because Shawn Carol Sandy had her birthday this week. So it's the birthday edition. So we had to make it super special and super relevant. But we're getting into a little bit of business training on this one. So you will learn today some really interesting, cool ways to challenge your buyer to think about return on investment, which will make you super sexy, super important, and irresistible to your prospects. So you don't want to miss one single minute of the raw and uncut version.
Excellent. All right. Here we go.
Please hit record.
Okay.
So I show up, there's balloons in my office, there's these little things here, and then there's this card on my desk to Shawn Carol Sandy.
Oh. It's my birthday party in your office?
I know. It says, wishes for a sweet birthday. And then it says, hope your birthday is frosted to perfection.
Oh.
Totally anonymous, no idea where this stuff came from. And then a little champagne bottle.
Are you going to drink it for me?
I hope not. It's bubbles.
Oh. Yay.
Oh, happy birthday, Shawn.
Thank you so much. What a good birthday surprise. That is awesome. Thank you.
So bummed I missed it. I couldn't believe I caught it on Facebook. I'm like, what? I don't even know when my co-host's birthday is. That's so terrible.
Vacation. That's just fine.
Did you have fun?
I did. My sweet family, they're so lovely. Mike got me a new fire pit. Great little cards, beautiful. He got me a couple other things. One of them is not in yet, but it's a llama theme. It's really cool. When it comes in, I'll just show you. But he got me this thing too for my office. I'm assuming it says,
"Oh,
you're gonna make me lose my mind up in here, up in here."
Oh my God, that's so great.
Isn't that funny? I look at my kids sometimes like, y'all gonna make me lose my mind. And, thinks that DMX song, up in here. Up in here.
So good.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
And your vacation was?
Perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Beautiful. And you went to Mount Rainier and
Yeah, so my aunt built this unbelievably gorgeous house in the woods across the sound from Seattle. And I've just been going there for, years. And it's been a few years since we went. And so it was just really nice. I mean, I've adopted my own little room there. And so it's just gorgeous. And I don't know if you saw the picture, but she heats the whole house with firewood, right? Like she's this woman in the woods. And so we were splitting firewood, and I love getting out there with the maul and the wedge and the big old, it's so good. You get such clarity when you're splitting wood, because it's all about the leverage. And I mean, I can beat all the boys. I can't beat a boy that can do it with an axe. Like I can't split a wood just with axe, but I can the leverage point and where it's going to split and just hit it just right. So anyway, I had fun.
You need to try that. I think that it's really, it's good to find those things. Like pulling weeds for me is a good way to sort of do that, get that clarity, just sort of, let your mind go and you're doing something or, real physical, something like the axe, that'd be good too. So
yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So we're getting ready for Boston.
Yes. Dianna and I don't get to see each other all the time. So we have a conference, the Women's Sales Pros Conference, Rev It Up. And I'm super excited. That's in a couple of weeks.
And Shawn Carol Sandy and Lauren Bailey are doing a session on cold call coaching or sales call coaching, which I'm so excited about. I'm going to totally do that. I cannot wait. Yeah. So anyway, I'm really excited that y'all are doing that. Calling coaching, because I think it's super important. I think it's hilarious that somebody thought to do it to a group of women who are sales pros. And of course we all need to work on our
absolutely. Everybody does. And I think that maybe we can talk about that as a topic. Is there something specific you want to talk about today?
Yeah, well, as we said, if you want to go from 5 figures to 6 figures in sales, you've got to get yourself at the buyer's table and they think about business thoughts and not just about product and not just about what are they called, like features and benefits, but you really need to be able to speak the language of business. So I thought that we could start with return on investment. I think we also need to cover at some point total cost of ownership, which includes acquisition, and highest and best use of resources. But I think ROI has been a really important one for me lately. So that's what I was thinking about.
Let's go for it. I'm gonna let you get into that though.
All right, cool. So I will kick us off by saying welcome. Welcome, everyone, to the SellOut Show, where we are always sold out. I am Dianna Guerin, and I am the irreverent sales girl, where my mission is to bring a dash of dignity to the art of selling.
Hi, Dianna. I'm Shawn Sandy, everyone. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of the Selling Agency, where we coach humans how to sell to other humans. Because if you're selling like you still have a BlackBerry, you might need to upgrade your skills.
You have a BlackBerry. Oh my God.
This was the last BlackBerry I had issued, I think when I was at Regis. I had 3 BlackBerries over the course of time. I had one of the first ones, and then the second one, and then the slim line, the sleek one. And listen.
I know.
I miss the buttons. Like, I don't want the tap buttons. I want
I know.
I want the buttons that have noise and sound. Yeah, I really like BlackBerry.
I know.
However, you need to upgrade.
And your little roller ball on there. Yeah, I know. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good.
It is. But it's time to upgrade. And just like, phones and operating systems and software, you have to upgrade your skill set.
You do.
But your skill set. And that leads us into what we're going to talk about today is let's update your business acumen. Let's update, what the way you communicate and talk with your clients. How about that for a segue?
I think it's great. I mean, our whole thing is for our boots on the ground, phone in the hand sellers to get to their solid 6. And you're just never really going to get to the solid 6 unless you can be at the table with executives. Right. And when you're at the table with executives, you have to think like the executives are thinking. And even if you didn't go to business school, there are some things that I think that you should really know and learn so that you can, be speaking their language and make your product, your service, relevant to what solutions they're trying to. And I think it helps you get in their brain. If you know some of the things that they're thinking about, then you can start thinking that way too and be much more relevant on all of your calls, your opening calls, your middle calls, and your closing calls. So
yeah. Well, this speaks to the heart of customer currency so much because every person in that buying committee has a different outcome that they're looking for. They have different risks. They have different filters that they see things through. They're also, every different level from CEO to VP to director to manager to user to, if someone even thinks that they're, I like to call users the legs of an organization. Everyone has a different way that they're measured for success or failure in their job. Yeah. And so that is what they're thinking about when you are coming to them to say, hey, put your money and trust in me and invest in me. And so the CEO is thinking about something very different than the VP, the director, and the user. You need to know those things, whether it's, the personal risk that's involved, but also what are the PBIs, positive business outcomes, that each one in those positions is looking for so that you can speak to those.
Yeah. Well, let's start today with return on investment, which some of you may run into. People will abbreviate it into ROI, but that's what they're talking about is return on investment. And who do you find are like who are sort of the persona? I mean, I think everybody sort of has some kind of a return on investment thought in their heads, but who are the executives that you think that you've seen that ROI is more important to? So if you're selling to that persona, you really need to get deep in the weeds on ROI.
Right. Well, I think CEOs, if you think about CEOs, they steer the ship. Sure. And you're looking at, how are we, positioned in the market? Whereas I think ROI is super, super important to VPs,
Yeah.
Decent directors, because they're managed to a specific set of KPIs that fall within their budget, that in their lane, right? I think that ROI is probably most important to that level.
Absolutely. The other one that, a lot of people don't understand this, but when they're selling to chief marketing officers, but chief marketing officer, they're big, one of their biggest things is ROI, return on investment. So if I'm going to put money into something, you have to really understand that a lot of the departments that you're selling into aren't profit centers. So they are always at risk, as you were saying before, they're always at risk on all of the decisions that they make to prove that the money they spent was worthwhile to something that happened on the bottom line of the company. And sometimes your buyer is not going to be held to account for like the dollars that come back from the investment that they made, but the people that are definitely the chief marketing officers. Your CFOs are always thinking about return on investment.
Yeah,
I mean, it's one of many for a CFO, but marketing. I think that people make a big mistake when they're selling into the marketing department, thinking, "Oh, this is flashy, this is trendy, this is interesting," because of course you have to think about those things, but really it always comes down to, did my investment turn into more sales, more revenue?
Right. And you are either doing one of two things. You have to figure out which one of these two things you're doing. You're either helping them increase revenue or you're helping them increase profit.
Exactly.
You're helping them make money or helping them save money. And whether it's, you have got to be able to tie your product, whether it's through five different, what is that, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. You've got to figure out how at some point you can tie into one of those two things and prove that. I think what's really important here is that you need to understand where you fit in the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
I sell, selling print, business cards. Business cards, I've got gallons of business cards around here. But, business cards, does that help people make money? Does it help them save money? That's a tough one, but you've got to be able to know, we just need them. Okay, great. What do you need them for? Well, whenever people meet people. I mean, you've got to, okay, well, why do they need them when they meet people? So they know to call us. Okay, what does that do for you? I mean, you've got to be memorable. You've got to be able to tie what you do to one of those two things and know where you are in the food chain. It may not be, here's one of my old ones. It may not be that this is going to, increase revenue tenfold, but can it save them money, or can it help branding? I mean, what is it exactly you're doing? You've got to be able to understand where you fall in the food chain so you can tie to one of those two things.
Well, yeah, and the return isn't necessarily dollars. I mean, when you can tie return to dollars to a CMO, or, as you said, a CEO or CFO, I think that's always really good. But I think the most important thing that a lot of people don't ask is, how are you measured on success? You said KPI. I don't think everybody knows what a KPI is. So you want to expand a little bit on that?
Sure. So key performance indicators, they're all different. Some people don't even call them that in organizations, but everyone is held to a standard, or held to something that they're measured to. They're measured on their performance. And so, say for instance, for VPs, key performance indicators might be, did we make quota? Or if it's not the sales department, did we, are we in budget? Or if it's labor, did we go over hours? Did we have overtime? Everyone's measured by some significant factors to say, did you do your job or did you not do your job? Did you do your job well? Are we over? Are we way over? Did we increase? Are we under? Everyone's measured by that. And so at the end of the day, how does making the decision to purchase from you impact how they're measured in their job? Ultimately, that's the only thing people are really thinking about. No one goes into making a buying decision with some altruistic, for the good of the company, bullshit. No, it's not. Everyone is in it to win it for themselves. Are you going to make me look good? Is this going to help me do my job, or help me do my job? Am I going to be measured? Is this a decision that's going to help me be measured as a success?
That's exactly right. And, and this is where you got to put on your thinking cap. If you're selling into manufacturing, a lot of times those people are trying to reach numbers that have to do with safety, or, not as many mistakes. Or what's really cool is when the seat that you've got as a salesperson is unique, because you get to see into all of the businesses that you are working with currently or selling to. And as much as people are getting educated about their own businesses and their own industry, you can actually bring insights to your customer to say, one of the reasons that all of these clients work with me is because this is the problem that I'm solving for them. Is this a problem that is important to you? And sometimes they're like, you know what? I'm going to look really smart with my management if I bring up that, reducing safety incidents has actually decreased turnover in other departments. And what if we started to decrease our turnover? What impact would that have on the bottom line? And when you can start to help people, your prospects, think through the problems that you solve from a bottom line perspective that maybe their company isn't even thinking about, and you can back it up with, recent articles in Inc. or Forbes or, or their industry rags, then you start to become really relevant, because you're not only, sort of hawking, whatever it is that you're selling, but you're also thinking about solutions that make them look smart to their managers and maybe even make them look smart in their industry. Win awards. Winning an award is a return on somebody's investment. Chief marketing officers, they may not actually need to see what you're selling them leads to a deal, but maybe they're being evaluated on awareness or net profit. It's where the net score, where how many times they get shared inside of their organization.
NPS.
Yeah. How embarrassing. Net promoter score. Anyway, this is what I'm pointing to is, you got to know what your person's thinking about.
Right. And what, there's a, kind of a vague question people have suggested to ask, like, well, what would make this a success to you? Go deeper than that. What are you being held to, and measured by in terms of what this means to you? Go a little deeper with your buyers there. I want to give you another example of what you're talking about. I thought this was absolutely brilliant. Knowing where you are in the food chain and tying that to ROI. So, in our country right now, we're in a shortage of truck drivers, and it's only getting worse. I hear. I don't know if you've heard this or not, and maybe I'm making this up. I'm probably not. I've heard it someplace. But so I remember the story. One of my bosses, 6 years ago, he shared this thinking with me that just made this concept of customer currency. It helped it bloom for me. So Volvo trucks are more expensive than maybe Peterbilt or Mack. This is what I've heard. And so one of the ways that Volvo went to market was, if you are a trucking company, you are trying to hire drivers. One of the things drivers care about is how often your trucks break down.
Sure.
So Volvos are more expensive, but they don't break down. Is that more attractive to hire drivers? So the problem isn't, I need a truck that performs. The problem is, I need drivers to work for our company and not my competitor, because there's a shortage. So would having these trucks with less breakdown promise, hire more drivers? And if you work for Volvo, Peterbilt, Mack, whatever, whomever, I'm just telling you what I heard. But seriously, so linking to what the real problem is, which is there's a shortage of drivers. And it's really competitive to get drivers, to what do drivers care about? They care about trucks that are not leaving them broken down, so they can get their miles in, so they can get, more loads, so they can get paid, etc. Buying this truck with that, yes, it costs more, but you can justify it by saying you will be able to retain more drivers. I mean, you have to know how that ROI plays down the road to the person that it matters to.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. It's the same thing in throughout the entire Midwest. Manufacturing is just desperate to hire labor. And I mean, they're willing to pay like 65, 75, 85 for somebody who would come in and work in manufacturing. A lot of these firms can't get somebody to pass the drug test. And, what you need to know is that the people that those manufacturers are selling to are usually in some kind of position that they require the manufacturer to administer drug tests. So when you start to think about think through those things, and maybe you have something that automates systems that they don't have to hire people, so that helps them solve that problem.
Yep.
And what I think is really interesting about this whole concept is that there's 1,000 touch points in any person's department or job. There's not only one thing that is going to make a difference to somebody. So you need to, I think, when you get creative and you really understand, your customer's currency, why does your product or why does your service make your client happy? What is their return? Like when you were selling TV, the return on their investment was that their satisfaction with their family seeing them on television. It wasn't ratings.
It was not ratings. Yeah.
No. And if you'd only been thinking of what everybody's looking for is ratings, then you would have never made a big difference for your television station. You would have never made a big difference for your customers. It would have been a bomb. So I just think there are a lot of different touch points that you can start to get creative about and become a real business partner.
Absolutely. And it's not, ROI isn't necessarily, here's what I think. I think that, yes, you should know, you ever work out pencil selling? Do you know what pencil selling is?
No, tell me, what is pencil selling?
Well, this is the way I understand. I should probably Google it in case my boss is lying to me or whatever. So it's whenever you're in front of the customer, you're like, well, let me break it down. You get in front of the customer, and if you're trying to say, this has just a minuscule cost per whatever for the investment, you do the math and break down, it's only 0.0001 cent per widget. Or if you're trying to say this is going to increase revenue, it's blah, 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 0.01 cent widget times 800 million widgets. And look, you can add, 5% revenue year. You do the math in front of them.
Yeah.
So you have to have an estimated idea of what your ROI is going to be, in the numbers and the figures. I'll give you another example of where knowing this you don't even have to be right. Like, you don't even have to be right, but you have to get that conversation started and the wheels turning about that, right? Yeah. So back at Office Max selling digital print, I would work with my office products partners to go into companies that had print shops.
Yeah.
Hospitals still had print shops. Hospitals were probably the biggest ones. There were some additional places that had print shops, but we went into this very large security company, and this guy was really kind of crazy. He was super paranoid. The guy who started the security company, he had a print shop. They would print all the documents there, put them in a box, and FedEx them to him overnight so he could review things, and then FedEx the approval back. I mean, it was just, everything they did was so antiquated and so old. And so talking to the chief procurement officer, HP and Gartner Research had just come out with a study talking about the average print spend per organization size. And so I said, okay, well, how much do you spend on print? And he gave me a number. And I said, okay, well, with the size of your organization, this study suggests that's about 6 times what you just said. And he slapped his hands on the table and goes, oh, bullshit. I said, okay, well, why? Well, we just don't. I said, well, and then I was able to say, well, what do you spend on shipping all the print? Well, that's not factored into there. I don't know what we spend on printing. They weren't tracking it. I was able to point out everything that they weren't tracking, and then be able to really bring home and drive home the idea that they had no idea how much they spent on print.
Right.
And it was able to start the conversation. That's not necessarily an example of ROI, but it was knowing the numbers and being able to start that conversation about the numbers with him that got him thinking in a totally different way. It pissed him off a little bit, but not in a, I'm gonna make you look dumb kind of way. I said, well, this is what the research suggests, and it was able to start the conversation.
And I do think it comes down to return on investment. I mean, you actually pointed out a place where they probably had leakage and didn't even know it. So then, he gets to actually have a new metric that makes him more relevant in his job.
Yeah.
The other thing I've found to be really, really successful is not only understanding, what the measures are that my buyer, maybe the day-to-day person is the one that I'm having a lot of conversations with, but I want to know what their boss is being measured on.
Yes, exactly.
And sometimes the person that I'm talking to that's the thing is, it's not unusual when you start to bring up these conversations for them to have to think about it, because maybe maybe that's not on their mind all the time. Is, what is it? When I go present this to my boss, who's ultimately going to have to sign off on this, what are they being judged on? And how am I going to be, if you make your buyer look, like a superstar with their organization. I mean, this is the risk thing again, is most people don't understand that, your reputation is at risk when you're going to like put a line in the sand and say, I want to put ink on the line that is dotted and money in behind this product. They're putting a lot at risk with their whole organization, with their management. There's so much turnover in corporate America today. I mean, like, nobody's safe, right? So if you can actually make somebody more relevant to their organization and prove it out, then you start to become somebody who can come back and sell again to them.
Right. You know what I'm hearing is, and particularly with CEOs, I hear companies are dying for people who will actually make decisions. Like no one wants, everything is moved to these bigger decision by committee. Let's get Shirley from, cafeteria involved. It's because people do not want to be the ones to step up, make a decision. And I think I've heard, again, I read it somewhere, so it must be true. I've heard that hiring a CEO is really difficult because, their neck is on the line, and it's really hard to find people who have a track record and will make decisions, because the decisions you make are what keep you or ruin you. Know that when you're selling to someone, the decisions they make to pull the trigger are either going to be good or it could be bad. And
and it is, and unless you are the leader in the marketplace, like what is it? There was the saying that nobody's ever going to get fired for hiring IBM, back in the day, because everybody was doing it, so there was no risk to it, right? So if you're that guy, if you're in that position, then good on you. And then what you say to people is, well, you may be considering these other guys, but you're not going to get fired for buying my product, even if it costs a little bit more. Are you really confident that those guys are going to be able to perform and not make you look like a jerk because everybody else is buying us? So that's your standpoint. But then if you're in the other standpoint where you're not the obvious one, you've got to do your best to allay their fears of, what are they worried about? Why are they going to be more of a superstar? How can you take away risk from not buying, the de facto standard? How can you help them take away that risk and feel really good about their decision? Because it's scary, like when your job is on the line just for your vendor. I mean, come on, it's not going to happen. So you have to really help them bust those fears.
Yeah. Now I know you sell into chief marketing officers is a buyer title, a role that you sell into. Who else do you sell into, and what do they care about?
Well, in the past, I've sold into technology. Like if you're selling into CTOs, chief technology officers, and their biggest concern, at least was, or one of their tippy top ones, is how is your solution going to integrate with all of the other things that we're doing from a technology perspective. So you may have the hottest things in sliced bread, but if they're working with legacy architecture and all of their other technology, or they're working with, incompatible systems, you've got to be able to make the case for how, how it's going to make sense for them to break all that. I think a lot of people don't understand what investment means either, because it's not just the price that's on the bottom of the invoice. It's how many man hours need to go into implementing this solution, and how many things do we need to get rid of, and what does it take to get rid of it, and what are the relationships involved with existing vendors that we're going to lose, and what do they get from that? You've got to really look at this entire picture, and it's not to get you discouraged that you're not a good answer, but when you can come in and have answers for maybe the top 3, and like you said, Shawn, you don't even have to get it right all the time. You just have to show that you're in the conversation. And then, sometimes you'll find that it doesn't make any sense to the people that want to buy. And then you watch LinkedIn and wait until they move on to another role in another organization. And then you call them again. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you'll find that you're just not going to make the case for the top 3 things that matter to them, even if your thing is the best thing.
And you boot it out of your pipeline and you move on, because you should have a healthy pipeline, and you should be able to boot stuff out of your pipeline. Seriously.
Yeah. And if you can't prove it, if you can't prove it, you shouldn't be, if you can't prove it and back it up that it's going to make a big difference to the things that matter to them or could matter to them, and they can see it, then they're not your customer. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And you brought up a point that I want to just point out is that nope, I can't think of hardly any products that a business or an organization would buy that they would buy in a vacuum.
No.
Nothing happens in a vacuum. Your product, your service is going to affect different people around the person who's buying, and you need to understand that. You know, and this is along the lines of another conversation, but for instance, you know, when I'm talking about retention and growth for accounts and penetrating accounts, you need to know everybody around that buyer and how your product impacts them, because you know what might look like, oh, that's just a little hiccup or a bump in the road for Larry is actually like a boulder, you know, crashing down on Susan and IT. I mean, like, you need to understand, because if you don't have the understanding of how your product, your service, your solution impacts everyone around it who's using it, touching it, training to it, paying bills for it, like, you know, Tina from accounting, then you don't have a good grasp on what truly the impact you have on the organization. You have to understand the different currencies of each person in the buying committee. I promise you, it will bite you in the butt.
So where do you get, so as a salesperson, like, where do you get this information? How do you start thinking through these things? So, you know, we've preached about you got to know this stuff, but how do you learn it? How do you get that information?
Well, I like to start with my current customers. You know, you've got someone it's almost like if you've got someone who's buying from you already and you have a good relationship, they've kind of created this safe space.
Right.
A safe little bubble where you can say, hey, John, you know, thank you so much for being a client. Would you mind if I'm trying to increase my industry knowledge a little bit? Would you mind if we sat down? I want to ask you a few more questions. And so you sit down with John, ask him about his role and compare that. Ask John, can you compare that to your peers in other organizations? Is this the standard? Is this an outlier? Okay, great. And tell me about who else the organization touches that I haven't met, John. You know, who's responsible for implementing training, or if this breaks and it's disrupting IT. You just have to ask, like, go in, you know, into your safe bubble with your client who loves you. Right. And just tell them, I'm trying to increase my, you know, my knowledge and my business acumen, and start asking questions about who's impacted, what does it mean to the organization, how would I break this down into an ROI for you? What are you measured on? You have to start asking some questions.
And people love it too. I mean, it's not like you're asking a favor. People love to talk about themselves and how their job is going and they let, you know, if you frame it as a customer survey, you know, I'm doing a customer satisfaction survey of my favorite clients because I really want to understand what we're doing well and how it's making a difference. And, you know, I'm even really interested in hearing what we could be doing better.
Yeah.
They'll give you an hour of their time.
Go get a couple boxes of Krispy Kremes and or Dunkin' Donuts and coffee, and ask John to invite 4 people that this impacts the table, and sit down and have a conversation.
It's so good. Yeah, that is really great.
Because they've already bought from you. You're just asking to get feedback. That is where I would start. And then go read some books. Make sure you're reading industry magazines or industry blogs, going to conferences. Learn harder. # learn harder, people.
# learn harder. Well, yeah. And, you know, if you're visiting their offices, you know, take a look around when you're sitting in the lobby. What are the rags that they have what are the magazines that they have on the table, or what are they reading in their, you know, take a look at their, what's it called? Their bookshelf. They still have bookshelves. You know, what are they reading? Or on LinkedIn, what are they sharing?
Yeah. I actually think, you know, along with the lines of, you know, I preach about where does your buyer eat lunch? Preach about where does your buyer eat lunch? Walking the floor and walking in the offices of your customers tells you so much, so much. I remember, let's go back to a print reference, and walking through the city offices, I would look at the cubicles on the walls, because we were in the process of trying to sell them managed print services and outsourcing digital print services and helping them shut down their print shop. I would look down the cubicle walls and I would see, you know, pictures of Johnny, pictures of Susie, all this stuff printed out, all these pictures and photos and memes printed out in color on paper.
And you were drooling.
Yeah. Where do you think they printed that stuff, y'all? They're printing it at work. Having access to a personal desktop printer was a huge, huge waste of resources. Now, because the people who had those desktop printers, they put up such a fight. Oh man, they would pitch fits. They would pitch a fit. That's the Southern term. They'd pitch a fit about losing their desktop printer. But when I walk through,
you ruined their lives.
I know exactly. Having to get up and walk 20 feet to a shared multifunction device was just going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
But walking through and sitting back down, I was able to point out to the procurement directors, like, I counted 17 cubicles with at least 3 full-blown color pictures printed out.
Oh, God.
That's like, $1 worth of ink each. Let's multiply that times, I don't know, like 10,000 employees or some ungodly number of printers they had. And that was a way for them to start getting their mind thinking about, oh, holy crap, hadn't thought about that. And
were they like spitwadding you on the way out? Like people from their cubicles? There's that.
Another thing we did too was we said, can we see your supply closets? We would go to the supply closets, and when you open the closets, you would see backstocked hordes of toner. Toner that expired and went bad because they forgot about it. They would order more, and then the device would break, because the printers are like, they change the models because that's where they make the money, is in the toner and the ink.
Right.
That's another thing, like talking to the procurement director at that organization was like, bullshit. They're not accounting for the stuff that's hiding in the closet, the waste and obsolescence. So being able to walk the floor, I feel like I'm on a soapbox. Being able to walk the floor, look in the closets, looking for the skeletons, in many of your instances, depending on what you sell, if you're able to do this, can give you so much insight.
It really does. And plus, you can see things about the culture that you would not have ever noticed. I was working in I was working in software as a service, and one of the benefits of using our service was an increase in morale and engagement and culture at the company, right? Because it's all about volunteering and giving back. And so I walked into this super sexy technology company in Chicago, and I noticed that all these people, everyone was wearing red. Right? Like everyone was wearing red, and there were guys walking around wearing like red gowns and stuff. I was like, what's going on here? I would have never seen it. It was a day that was celebrating, I can't remember what the thing was, a cultural, thing at the company, but it was all about engagement and spirit. And, there was team spirit. And I was like, so this is their culture. Now I know what I want to talk most about of what, we did a lot of things. We helped them measure things that they couldn't have measured before, but that wasn't the thing. We had seen significant increases in the companies that we worked with in their culture and engagement and fostering and making that a better experience. So now I knew what to talk about, and it was only because I went. I would have never had visibility into any of that. It's so good.
Yeah. So, we have SDRs and inside sales reps that watch our show.
Yeah.
So it's too bad for you. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's really hard, to say if you are not an outside sales rep and you don't have the ability to go to your clients and go in there. That is why visual is so important. Video and photos and pics, to be able to say what's going on in your office. Oh, we're celebrating. It's Fantasy Football Friday. So, oh my God, send me a picture and share what's going on in your organization, and matching that up is really super important.
Get a Zoom conference going, even if they're there, and say, hey, let's take take your laptop. I want to see what's going on. I want to see what your world looks like. Let's take a little tour of your world.
That's so funny you say that, because my sellers, BB King's Blues Company, I just introduced them to Zoom, and they've got people who come in and do site visits, right? We have people who don't do site visits. I said, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to send you menus and ideas of, what to do. And then we'll pick up the phone and we'll get on call. I'm like, do a Zoom and share your screen, pick it up and walk around the club, or, do it with them. So you've got the face, you can see their eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul. You can hear their voice. You do it with them rather than, having that phone in between you where you can't see each other. anyway, so it's going really well. They're loving it. And rather than getting back to the buyers and saying, oh, well, when they get back to when you pick a menu item, I think I should go through the menu with them live, and it takes off their plate, but also you wrap it up. Like, you talk about decreasing your buying cycle. That could be a tremendous asset to do it live with them. So use those tools, video and photos. They're going to have a tremendous ROI for you as a salesperson.
No, they really are. And all these tools are free. Most of them. Zoom, you should sponsor us. Hello, Zoom.
Zoom is free. I pay for Zoom. I upgraded because I have multiple people on longer calls, but the basic account is free, and you cannot beat free.
No, it's just to get you hooked. So then you upgrade, which you absolutely should upgrade. You should upgrade. Listen to Shawn Sandy. Anyway, no, I think that's great. So, I just don't think there's much more to say about it. I mean, just, really understand exactly how your product service impacts, be able to, it's kind of the whole challenger sale of what you were talking about, Shawn, is walk the floor, challenge their assumptions, bring new information, new industry information, find a way. And if you can prove it out, then you'll be able to sell it.
And look at ROI from both the hard costs,
sure,
or the assumptive hard costs or the estimated hard costs, but also look at ROI from the personal costs. If I think people tend to do one or the other, but I've not met a lot of salespeople who do both. But we've spent a lot of time talking about knowing what those costs are, knowing what the risk is. Risk is a cost to someone. What it's going to cost me professionally, personally, et cetera. So know those two. So if I hope that if you were doing one, now you do the other. And if you were sort of playing in the edges, now you know both.
Yeah, it's brilliant, which will lead us into total cost of ownership, which is a much harder number. But so learn how to speak the business of business and stop hoping. And
start selling.
That's right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.